So basically, I think one of her daughters has a child who basically when they went to go get the MMR vaccine, basically she said like days later or months later, her son got ASD, which stands for
autism spectrum disorder.
And so her and her mom are arguing about it. She's saying that that is the cause and the reason why her son got ASD, and she and her mom is basically saying like, no, there has been cases like basically that has been proved that actually happens, and then she's giving statistics on how many kids that the MMR vaccine has actually helped, and then also she talked about a brain issue that could have some people who don't get the MMR vaccine or would get measles causes, and then that prevented other kids from having that. So yeah, but she's really saying that it caused her child to have ASD.
Okay. Okay, so there are a couple of people here in our case study. There's Kristen, who is the younger sister. There's Carly, who's the older sister, and then there's Anne, who is the mother. And they're having brunch together, and the topic of the MMR vaccine comes up because it's almost time for one of the daughters, 14-month-old Alyssa, to receive this vaccine. So it's coming up close to her time to get the vaccine. There is evidence of a child who is on the spectrum, and one of the daughters believes that it was because of the MMR vaccine that Anne developed autism. So Anne, who is mother, who's a nurse, is kind of presenting evidence against this idea, but the daughter is bringing up
Jenna McCarthy and her stupid platform.
What?
Jenna McCarthy and her stupid platform.
Who was on Larry King Live, and she's talking about all the celebrities who are speaking out against the MMR vaccine. They're convinced that Big Pharma is telling people to do this. There's a conspiracy. Okay, and then Anne presents some arguments against this case. So she's talking about this paper that they read in class, where following the measles vaccine release in 1963, 50 million cases were prevented, 5,200 lives in the United States alone. Okay, so Carly says, okay, whatever, I've seen the link, but look at my son. He was happy, he was normal, and then he got the vaccine, and he stopped smiling, he stopped talking, he kind of drifted away. And so she has the greater evidence of the children, her child. Okay, so all of this kind of started, well, let's look at the data first. So this is a graph showing the prevalence of autism in the United States from 1996 up to 2007. So this is a little bit old data, but what is the trend that generally hits you as soon as you look at the graph? It's going up, right? So there has been increasing trends from 1996 to 2007. So in the last 11 years, there's no denying that the rates of autism have increased quite dramatically. What explanations do we have for this?
People aren't getting, or people are choosing not to vaccinate their kids because they assume there's a correlation between autism and the vaccine.
So you think if people are not vaccinating their children, that would result in an increase in autism? This is
oh no!
At autism.
Oh, that's autism. No! I thought this was like measles outbreak.
No. This is the rate of prevalence of autism in the United States.
It's not due to the vaccine.
Okay. Okay. So there's an argument that it's not really that the number of cases have gone up, but the number of diagnosed cases have gone up. That we're more aware of it. We have a better understanding of what it is. We have a better understanding of the spectrum, right? We know that autism is a spectrum disorder. What does that mean?
Right.
There's a range, right? There are different symptoms for different people, right? It's not a one size fits all kind of disease where everybody has the same symptoms. So there's a better understanding of the spectrum, better understanding of what falls on the spectrum, and maybe higher rates of diagnosis. Okay, so that's one potential explanation for this. What are other potential explanations? Yes.
What type of vaccine they're taking?
Say again,
What
sorry.
type of vaccine they're taking?
The type of vaccine that they're taking, okay, so could potentially be vaccine related, right? Based on this evidence, we have no evidence to rule out the fact that kids are getting more vaccines in 2007 than they were in 1996, we know that. So potentially the combination of those vaccines, or the time at which the developmental time frame at which those vaccines are given, it's a possible explanation. Yeah.
There could be other factors that is increasing it, but they're just linking it to the MMR vaccine. So
Okay.
it could
Genetics.
have nothing to do with it, but the hysteria around it is making it link it to the vaccine.
Okay, so let's ignore the MMR link for a second. Let's just think about ideas or potential explanations for why autism has increased, rates of autism have increased in the United States. So what other ideas, Callie, are you talking about that might be prevalent?
Just anything, there could be other factors in it.
Okay, Ladarius and then Megan.
I also feel like maybe more types of autism have been like founded and like taught and like saw different children that they did in the past in 1996. There's also new technology to basically like find other
Yep.
types of autisms that were not there. in
Sure,
1996.
we're certainly better at diagnosing autism in 2007 than we were in 1996, for sure. Megan, what were you gonna say?
I think somebody understands that. I think we recognize it, not just like, oh, like, they're the weird kid, like, there's something going on there neurologically. And then I think other factors could be like diet or like environment, stuff like that, like if they're exposed to not like lead paint, but like
Sure,
something
sure.
similar to the environment.
Right, sure, something environmental, something in the diet, some other changes that have happened, environmental exposure to something, dietary changes, all of those things are certainly potential explanations for this increase. So we've got 4 or 5 potential explanations here. One of them, yes, being vaccines, other ones being some other environmental things or recognition type things that could explain this increase in prevalence. So the data table below, this was taken from Wakefield's paper in 1998. So he published this paper in the Lancet in 1998, which is a British journal. And this was a table taken directly from that paper, okay? So this is looking at some of his data. It's a little bit adapted from his paper. But this is looking at some of his evidence. So he has 12 children that he looked at. He made notes on their behavioral diagnosis, so whether it was autism or other things. And then he listed the causative agent for the diagnosis. The causative agent was identified by either the parents or the pediatrician. So he interviewed the parents, he interviewed the pediatricians of these children, and based on what either the parents said or what the pediatrician said, he listed the causative agent. And then he listed the interval from exposure to symptoms. So how long did it take between the time the child received the vaccine or exposure to whatever the causative agent was to the time they began to develop symptoms. So I want you to take a look at this, kind of process this data a little bit, think about what makes sense in this data table, what doesn't make sense, where are the gaps, where are the holes that you see, and just general comments on this table. So take just a few minutes and think about that.
Is this data? This doesn't even look. I don't know what I'm looking at. Like for one child, oh, I think the child has autism because recently he got the MMR vaccine, and we know that's because he basically went from normal to worse within a week. What? No, like when I'm like I'm calling BS on the fact that they were able to catch this within a week and 48 hours. I'm like, you guys are parents. I'm pretty sure you are not.
You don't have a medical degree.
And to make such a serious claim that the shot causes autism or a disorder, that's a pretty bold statement to figure out, oh yeah, I solved this in a week. No, you didn't. Like,
Solved this in 24 hours. No, you did not.
no, you did not.
Developed.
It developed naturally, or your child was just born with it, like most children are. So, I mean, this is a 1998 study, so I don't think they even fully understood what autism was and what causative agents cause autism. So, I mean,
How about like not a single one of these children, like not one of them out of the 12 is just really like, you know, on the
that's a small
autism
pool.
disorder.
Like,
just
how
like this
old were
one.
these kids?
Just
What
this one
race were
kid,
these kids? What gender were these kids?
however you say this word. Yeah. And then maybe this one. Oh, this is a question mark autism.
They don't even know. Like, you're questioning your
There's
own.
literally only like three, sorry, this one right here, where there's just like question marks.
They don't even
And
know.
then the
which is
rest are
why
like
I'm
autism.
why did they publish this?
And one that's spectrum disorder.
No.
It's just inconsistent. They have a very small pool of
Newspaper people
participants. Like,
don't publish the
it's too small to make any statement whatsoever. Yeah, you need a larger amount, like 12 is
There's a small pool,
too small.
and
That doesn't
coincidentally,
even count as like
1, 2, 3, 4,
where are your
5, 6,
control
7,
groups?
8.
Where are your
people to buy it.
This is
Wait,
pretty.
where are the control groups?
It's a
Where are the
pretty
control groups?
bold.
About
It's pretty
those
bold to use this as data. Where more than half
Yeah,
of your
those are the,
subjects have autism.
So you should probably turn the van over there. But yeah, there's not a control group. Like, we're the ones that were not vaccinated, and it's compared to. So
That's why I said, like, it's pretty ironic that more than half of these children have autism, like, guaranteed have autism.
and then most of them, it's like you can't even make a like diagnosis on their behavior or anything. You could also just say normal, but no, they don't.
It's a 1998 study.
I know, but still, it's like I expect better.
And it's
I don't care.
1998.
I don't care what year you're from. I expect better.
Nah, 1990s. They were still trying to figure out everything back then.
Aren't they still doing that now? I mean, they're better at BSing their way through it now, anyways.
Person should diagnose, well, not diagnose, should get her child vaccinated. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. You either do it or your kid gets measles and or polio. It's just as simple as that.
Which, if it gets bad enough, can leave you in an iron lung.
Or to death, because the child's only 14 months old. Or to death. It's either you get it or you don't.
Neither you don't do it, but there's no ifs, ands, or buts.
You should get it.
You should. Technically, like, we know that, but they didn't know that then.
I mean, even back then, my mom still gave me every single shot that I needed, because, I mean, there's a reason why they give you a list of what each child needs as they go through, like, their 13, 17 years of life. Like, it's necessary, but people start to question it, think of, oh my gosh, they're poisoning my child. Like, this is why people are getting sick more often.
Most of the time, they don't know what's in it. For us, we know how a vaccine works.
I mean, even then, if they want to know, go on Google. Like, go on Google. Ask your doctor.
here's the issue.
I'm pretty sure they will tell you what's in it.
But look, some people are too stupid to use Google, apparently.
Well, if they're at a doctor's office, your
just look up
your
the first
daughter,
thing that they find.
your doctor by Hippocratic oath should be able to tell you what's in the vaccine.
If you ask, but if you don't
Yeah,
ask, I
if
don't
they
think
ask.
they tell you. But like, people could. I agree with you. People can they can look it up. But
And they
what
can
if-
ask.
What if they just don't know what they're looking at? They'll probably read a bunch of.
That's
different
why
things.
you have a doctor.
Yes, but for those that are too dumb to ask their doctors and
Well,
just Google
if-
everything and
so-
they think they're a genius just by Googling.
So if they have the audacity to go and be like, oh, I don't want to give my child this shot because I think there's something there that causes
Okay,
poison.
what?
How
Tell
they know?
me something positive about the data.
Nothing.
It gives you a
Oh,
range.
yeah.
Hang on,
Change.
Nathan.
That's changed.
It gives you a range of like expected time from exposure to symptoms,
Really?
like 24 hours to 2 weeks.
Okay, so there is a range of exposure times.
I like the font style.
You can get like a generalization of the age that you see it in the kids that it starts
Okay.
to show up.
All right, we see
Really?
something.
Really?
15 months, a week after 15 months is a year.
I mean,
There's a little bit. There's
Yeah, it's
some,
only a
some
little.
of them, it
It's
tells
only
us
for
something
3.
about their ages.
man.
Okay, what else?
So first.
That's it.
Anything else? All right, tell me about your problems with the data. The question. 12 is not a sufficient sample size.
No.
Okay, so 12 is a very small sample size, so that certainly is problematic. So what other problems do you see with the data?
They
Like-
don't show any of the kids that didn't get the vaccine that had autism, and that maybe they didn't survive because of the fact that they didn't get the vaccine, or they just didn't care.
Okay, so there's 2 problems here in terms of their controls. Number 1, they don't show kids who were diagnosed with autism but did not get the vaccine. What else do they not show?
Kids who just didn't get the vaccine and who did not end up with autism.
Kids who got the vaccine but did not develop autism. Okay, so there are 2 big control groups missing from this data. Okay, and that is something that we all have to be very careful about when we're doing research.
Yeah, leave the
Regardless
bias
of what
out.
type of research you're doing, but certainly when you're looking at shut up. Alessandra's doing an experiment right now with no control under my direction.
Ooh.
So we all have to be okay. Nobody asked you to be here. All right. So we all have to be very careful about proper controls. So specifically when you are doing behavioral type studies with human subjects. Okay, what else? What other problems do we have with the data?
Ooh, I'm gonna raise my hand for this one.
24 hours one seems like it's really fishy because that's such a sudden turnaround. So your child had to have been showing symptoms previously.
Okay, so we have a little bit of problem with number 7 in that this person developed autism within 24 hours after
Yeah,
receiving
7
the
and
vaccine.
10.
Oh, 7 and 10, yep, okay. All right, Brenda, go ahead. Oh, okay. So their parents or their pediatrician identified what caused their autism. Okay, that's a little fishy, right? Like for the parents to say, yep, it was the MMR vaccine. Catherine and then Leah.
Some of them, like the causal agent, they claim it's MMR, but like number 5 says none. But MMR, like yes, they have autism, but they also had the vaccine a long time ago. So, and like how does that? And the same for 12, none. But they had MMR. Like, how's that work?
Okay, so what do you think he's kind of doing here?
He's trying to read it in any possible way.
He's tainting the data a little bit, right? Like
It's not even a little bit. It's all.
It's all
heavily,
lies.
It's not even.
None of it makes any sense.
Yeah, heavily. He's tainting the data.
So one child was really vaccine and the other
To add on to that, I do not like how over half of these kids have autism. Like magically, like he can guarantee that 8 out of 12 were confirmed to have autism, while 4, 8, and 9's like, and 10. You know, I don't know. It might be this, but it's related to the fact that they got this shot after 16 or how many months. I'm like, really?
So what else do we have to be very careful with when we're doing human subjects? Any of you done human subject research?
You gotta make sure it's ethical. Keep the biases out of the room.
Okay, talk about that. She said you're supposed to get a statistical representation of the population. What does that mean?
So you're not supposed to take from one group specifically. You're supposed to have a variation of groups because otherwise you end up with this where like 100% of these people, but like you're supposed to get which is with a problem with the control because you don't even have any control.
Yeah. So what if I wanted to do a study and I wanted to ask the question, do bio majors jump higher than non-bio majors?
you have to
And
get
I
a
only
pretty
tested
big
you guys.
I mean, that wouldn't be considered fair or inaccurate.
Would that be a good study?
No.
No, because you're all what?
Bio majors.
You're all bio majors, okay?
Except for biochem
So
people.
I would have to go across campus and get some English majors and some history majors and some nursing majors and test a whole bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
So one big problem with his grouping is that in fact these kids were not chosen at random. Okay? Let me tell you a little bit about these kids. First of all, these kids were, how did we select these kids? Give me one second. So we know that it's important to choose kids at random. The problem is, so let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Wakefield himself.
He's a liar.
Sorry? Well, okay, formerly Dr. Wakefield.
Awesome.
Yes, and he was stripped of his medical license.
Awesome.
Andrew Wakefield.
Good.
So, just in the period leading to his 1998 publication, this paper in the Lancet, he was paid 435,000 pounds. I don't know how much that is.
That's more a year.
Yeah. 435,000 pounds in fees. Okay, so it says it's about $750,000
Wow.
plus his fees and expenses. He was paid about $750,000 by a man named Richard Barr. Richard Barr was an attorney attempting to demonstrate a connection between the MMR vaccine and autism in order to sue the vaccine manufacturer. Okay, so this attorney hired Wakefield, basically, to help him find this connection so that he could sue the vaccine manufacturer. So that
When
is
law wants to get
conflict of
involved in
interest number one.
science.
All right, the 12 children, again, were not randomly selected. Parents of about half of these children were litigants in Richard Barr's lawsuit against the MMR manufacturer.
But they lost, right?
They lost.
Awesome.
But about half of these kids, their parents were litigants in this lawsuit. All right, so that's how he chose about half of his children, not a random selection.
No.
He, at the time of this publication, Andrew Wakefield, was working in the lab to develop, guess what?
A vaccine.
A measles vaccine of his very own that he hoped to patent, and therefore he would benefit financially from discrediting the current measles vaccine. Okay? So that's red flag number 3. We know that. Okay, so I'll talk to you more about the fallout in a second. But those were sort of the 3 major conflicts of interest leading up to this paper. And when you submit a paper to a journal, I don't know if you guys have done that yet, but anytime you submit a paper to a journal, you are asked, are there conflicts of interest when you are submitting this journal or submitting this article? So for example, if I was being paid by, if I was using antibodies, let's say I'm using CHO1 antibodies to detect CHO1 binding partners, but I'm being paid by Abcam to do this work, that's a conflict of interest. Okay, it doesn't mean I can't publish the paper, but it means that I have to disclose when I submit that paper that I'm being paid by the antibody company to do this research. Right? So I have to disclose that information. Andrew Wakefield did none of that when he published this paper. Okay, so let's look at, yes, sure. How did it get published?
I mean,
Well, I
nowadays.
think this is an important point, right?
That is true.
Because a lot of times, one of the things I hear from students is like, well, it's published, so, you know, it has to be right? And I think that's an important point to take note here, is that a lot of stuff that actually gets published is crap. Like, a lot of it is just crap. So you can, I mean, that is your responsibility as a scientist, as a trained scientist, to read those papers and make a educated decision of your own as to whether or not you believe what it is these researchers are reporting and what they're claiming to be true. So that is a hefty responsibility that you have as a researcher to be able to read that article and decide for yourself whether or not you believe what is being reported. So many people, trained or not, read this paper and said, well, it's published in the Lancet, so this has got to be true, right? And even though we can take one quick look in 10 minutes at this data and say, something's not right here, a lot of people didn't do that. They looked at this paper and said, oh my God, these 12 people, look at them. They've got the MMR vaccine and they got autism. It's got to be true. It's got to be
Fake
a win,
news.
right? So you can't just believe everything that you read just because it got published in a paper. Okay? And the Lancet, I mean, we're talking a major medical journal, right? This is like publishing in the New England Journal of Medicine here in the States. Okay, so just because it's published in Nature or Science or whatever big time journal you want to put in there, doesn't mean it's not crap. People publish crap every single day. Alright, so let's look at the consequences, sort of the fallout of this publication. Oh my gosh, that light. Okay, so he published this paper, and then on February 28th, 1998, this was the same day that his paper came out, he had a press conference. So he announced that he and his team believed there was a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. 8 of the 12 children in their study developed the neurological disorder within a few days. Somehow, the vaccine was causing intestinal inflammation, allowing harmful proteins to enter the child's bloodstream, eventually traveling to the brain, causing the disorder. To prevent this, parents simply needed to request that their pediatrician separate the MMR vaccine into 3 separate shots, one for measles, one for mumps, and one for rubella. The same way these immunizations had been delivered prior to the development of the combined vaccine. So Wakefield didn't actually say, don't vaccinate your kids. He actually said, separate the vaccines into 3 individual vaccines. So MMR
to support Big Pharma.
And rubella. So the way that it is given, they are all 3 in one dose, called it in a trivalent vaccine. He says separate them out. Why did he say separate them out?
Big Pharma, more money.
He had his own measles vaccine, right? You don't care what you do with your mumps and your rubella vaccine. Fine, get those, but use my measles vaccine is eventually what he was going to say. Okay? So how do you think public reacted to this?
They went crazy.
Do you think they understood separated out?
No. They ignored that.
No. What would you do if you were a parent and somebody comes to you and says, this vaccine is going to give your kid autism?
Slap them, walk, then run the other way.
You would not vaccinate them, right? You would not give your kid something that you think is going to cause autism.
But how do they know that?
There's no way. If somebody came to you, somebody respected, this is a doctor, it's published in the Lancet, oh my gosh, and somebody said, don't do this, you wouldn't do it, okay? And most people are not going to go to their doctor and say, separate it out and give them 3 separate shots.
I wouldn't even tell my doctor that. I would just tell him, give him the shot, because I trust my doctor.
Right, they didn't read the paper, they wouldn't know the data, they would just not do it.
This was 1998.
Oh, this is in 2000.
I was born.
I was in 97. My mom still had to get the shot anyway, so it's like,
Alright, so take a look at the graph. And let's look at the fallout of his paper. What happened?
He opened Pandora's box. And now everybody's like, no, don't get the measles shot. No.
What was the question?
Take a look at this graph. This is representing the fallout after his press conference, after his data was published. And let's see what happened. What did people do?
People started to not vaccinate. Measles cases went up. I'm glad they revoked his medical license. What a stupid man. Money isn't everything. Is he even alive still?
Possibly.
Okay, so what happened? Vaccination rates plummeted.
Yeah, it
Okay.
plummeted.
So on the right side, so this is talking about the MMR vaccination rates, and then on the left side is the number of measles cases. The arrow represents the date of publication of his paper. Okay. So you can see we were kind of holding steady up here, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96. Look at measles cases.
It was non-existent.
None. Okay, not even anything on the graph. Okay, vaccination rates were pretty high. So if we look at that arrow, where that arrow goes, what happened to vaccination rates? Plummeted, and what started happening to rates of measles cases?
Increase.
Up. So this goes all the way up to 2009 and 10. We are up to, what, about 1,200, almost 1,200 cases of measles. So this is in the United Kingdom, by the way. So this data is in Britain. So, and that number has continued, the United States, this data mirrors this, okay, so it's very similar to what we're seeing in the United States. And we now know that measles outbreak numbers have continued to rise. We are still seeing unprecedented numbers of measles cases and vaccination rates. So we plummeted out about 2003, 2004. We're starting to see general trends go back up, but nowhere near where we were prior to the publication of this publication. So, do you think his data and interpretation of his data merited the resulting public fear of the MMR vaccine?
Mm-hmm.
Why not?
Because people obviously just didn't really read his conclusion to the paper, so it didn't merit you not getting the vaccine at all, instead of just separated out.
That's right. How do we get our news, our information? Do we go to the Lancet and read the papers?
No, it's whatever is regurgitated out of the TV.
Right. We get it from
News
TV,
anchors.
we get it from Facebook, we get it from Washington Post.
New York Times.
I mean, I will tell you,
Rolling Stone.
I was a little bit horrified myself about 3 years ago. I mean, I have 2 kids, right? I don't watch the news. But it did dawn on me about 3 years ago that I was getting about 75% of my news from Facebook. Like almost everything that I read, I was clicking on an article from Facebook. I was like, I can't do this. I have to stop this. It's not responsible. So, but that's how most of us get our news, right? I don't think I'm alone in that. And
Yeah,
even when we watch the news, what do we know about news sources?
They over-exaggerate everything.
Bias in every news source, just about that you watch, regardless of whether you watch NBC or Fox News or CNN or whatever it is, you're going to get some bias in your news reporting. So as a responsible person, this information comes out, this press conference comes out, what should we do?
Do our research.
We should do our research. But what did people do?
Go crazy and chose not to vaccinate.
Right. They just said, okay, we accepted it, this is true, and we're not going to vaccinate. Okay. So, and this is what we have to show for it. Right? So crazy. All right, so I want you to take a few minutes in your groups, and I want you to think about ways that you could improve Wakefield's study. So what would you change? What would you do differently? What would you design a better study to demonstrate or not demonstrate, to test, let's say, the cause and effect relationship that he tried to show here. So he tried to show MMR vaccine is the cause, autism is the effect, all right? So think in your groups, design a better study to demonstrate that cause and effect relationship, and then talk about the details of it. So how
I would improve by at least showing that there is no cause and effect for autism in the shot. I mean, first off, we'll get a larger pool of kids varying in ages that we know their age, we know their race, we know like their family background and genetic history. And then like these have to be kids though that have not received the shot yet.
Yeah, you have to see both.
Yeah.
Assess them before
And after. And I mean afterwards just monitor their behavior.
Because it can't just have been the MMR.
I don't think it's been I don't think it's any vaccine. I think it's just
any vaccine
genetic.
either, but I'm just saying, like, if he was seriously doing this, like, don't just include, what other things are going on and other factors,
I
basically.
mean,
Because
us
he's just
scientists
including
have tracked
one
kids
factor.
ever since they're born. I mean, it's not that hard. That's what I think. Track kids the moment that they're born.
Okay.
yeah, I mean it's pretty much a yes. Like, track them
Mm-hmm.
when they're born, track everything, and then
Mm-hmm. Monitor behavior, talk with their pediatricians
Not
or
the
whatever.
parents.
I mean, parents can have a say, but I mean, even then,
But, like, if you're looking for a
based off
diagnosis,
of,
look at
I'm
a
not looking for a
pediatrician.
diagnosis. I'm looking. I was
I
just say
know,
talk
but I'm
talk
just saying,
talk
like-
talk with pediatrician, but
I mean, overall,
I mean,
this whole study is terrible.
the results will show autism is not the effect of the vaccine. Here's why. I mean,
Another investigate other reasons why causes autism emerges in children.
there are tons of reasons why, but people just think that it's just this shot, and I'm like, no, it's not. You probably carry the gene and you don't even realize it.
Exactly. But I don't know. But do you even know what a vaccine is now? That's what I question first. I look at that, I'm like, do you even know what a vaccine is?
It's not even bad if your child is autistic. That just means they just are
Life is
unique.
a little different for them.
They are different.
They just do different things in life. Not no different than somebody who's blind or deaf. They just they live the world in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're still the same. They're just like that. It's not the end of the world. Unfortunately, most parents think it is. Most of the time, they're probably just afraid of like all the hardships and responsibilities that they might have. Like,
I mean, that's why they chose to have a kid.
exactly. You are, like, for better or worse, you are responsible for that life that depends on you. Just because it's a little bit harder now does not mean it's going to be any less of the responsibility you prepared for. So I think it's just I don't get it. If you're not ready to come with all the challenges a kid has, then don't have it. Especially if this is your reaction to that. Just no. I have nothing else to add.
That's what I'm saying. I don't like it. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, Thomas. So the intention fair from 1 to 3. Is that okay? Because Bailey said she's gonna skip class. So, dude, I'm like, it's fine. You don't come. I'm just standing for
Okay,
the
bigger
person.
sample size,
Include the control groups.
exclude control groups,
Randomize the samples.
randomize the samples,
Don't ask if there's something causes.
don't ask the parents.
And we said monitor them for longer periods of time before it came out.
Okay, how was it?
It's not good.
Nathan?
So this is just my opinion. I said we should just throw out an experiment.